Way back into the distant past, when Pete was like 15. He joined a mail-in movie club, 11 takes for pennies. And now cut to 2025, the movie club caught on to Pete's life. And now they want to punish him, so they trapped him in a room with a bunch of movie tapes. Pete didn't want to pay for the movies he got in the 90s. He'll have to watch random horror tapes and tell us about gore and probably some rape. Now keep in mind, Pete didn't pick. They use random numbers and a long list. He's got to get through every movie, one each day for the time we can't foresee. Helpful snowman roll call. Anxiety. Grouchiness. Entropy. Snow. If you're wondering why he did this song and other FAQ facts, just shut up and listen to this show, or fuck it, take a nice nap. It's Helpful Snowman Podoween 2025.
All right, today's movie is Survive the Hollow Shoals. Have you ever seen the show Alone? It's a show, it's like a reality TV show where they drop a bunch of people in the woods and they survive alone using only like what they brought in, which is super limited. And they just kind of last out there for a certain period of time or until everyone else drops out, or usually when they half starve and the producers are like, get that guy the fuck out of there. We don't want him to die on camera. It's similar to Survivor, except they get nothing. And these are people who are sort of knowledgeable about, wilderness survival and stuff. These aren't just like investment bankers who are like, I don't know, maybe I'll lose some weight. It's people who know how to do this sort of thing. The entire show is filmed by the participants themselves, right? So they have like GoPros and shit like that, and they set them up and they talk to them and stuff. And that's how this movie Survive the Hollow Shoals works. A guy gets dropped off in the woods and is like doing his own sort of version of Alone. Which, starting off, I think it's a good premise. Like, it gives a reason for this to be found footage. It gives an excuse for things if things look cheap, or if there's bad camera work, or like almost anything really. Like, you can hide a lot of sins within that structure, right? You can hide a lot of indie film shortcomings by being like, well, it's found footage and here's the reason the footage exists and here's how it was all filmed. It's like, all right. I like this in an indie movie, which is like a movie working within its limitations and saying like, well, here are my limits. Here's how I can kind of turn that into a strength. Now, what makes a good episode of Alone is it features personalities who are interesting in some way. Like, they're a little weird or they're a little quirky, and they're on the show to win money for something specific. A lot of them have sob stories, or some of them are like, well, I want to open up this kind of business or something like that. Some of them are very boring, and they're just like, I want this so I can provide for my family. And it's like, I mean, you could just get a job, but okay. I don't know. What the fuck do I know? And there are also personalities sometimes on the show who are like, not people that you want to be best buds with, but they're somewhat interesting to watch. There was a guy named Roland who was very interesting to watch on that show because he seemed a little crazy. And at one point he like stabbed, I don't know, an elk or an musk ox or some fucking wild animal that he had shot with an arrow and wounded but hadn't killed, and he ran up to it and stabbed it and eventually did manage to kill it, it was crazy. You're like watching it and you're like, I cannot fucking believe this is happening. And then you're imagining the producers watching, I presume they like give the footage back to whoever, and the producers are probably watching that and being like, you got to be fucking kidding me right now. I would say the worst people on Alone, the most boring people to me, tend to be the ex-military guys. And like, I'm sorry, but like, when did we all get the idea that being in the military prepares you to live in the woods without access to anything? Like, it's 2025. How many people in the American military are fighting in a like woods type environment? You know what I mean? And like, do they need to catch their own fish to survive? And like, why would the military even try to teach you how to use a bow and arrow? Like, why would that even be vaguely something they would do? I mean, I guess it's just like the idea of vague military toughness or whatever. But like most times when I see them on the show alone, they're kind of just generically handsome, fit, youngish men who seem to put a lot more care into beard maintenance than I can identify with. So our hero in Survive the Hollow Shoals kind of occupies that bland military survival-y guy space. Like he seems competent at doing in the woods stuff, and that's about the extent of his whole personality in the movie. So here's what happens. Like he's out there, he builds a shelter, he makes fire, he does all the things that they do on the show. And maybe about 20 minutes in, he's got some footage where it's nighttime and it's dark and he hears a weird noise. And then he walks around to check it out and doesn't find anything and goes back to bed. And then we start the next day and start over. And this kind of happens over and over. It's like a rinse and repeat thing where the same kind of thing happens a bunch of times. And sometimes it's like a scarier noise, or sometimes he sees something and then sometimes nothing happens. And this movie does one of my least favorite things that horror movies do. And I'm going to now debut what I call Pete's balloon theory of horror. When something scary happens in a movie, it's like shooting a big breath into a balloon, right? And as things get scarier, the balloon gets more and more full. The tension continues to rise until, boom, non-sexual climax, get your mind out of the gutter. What a lot of horror movies do, though, is push a big breath in, usually through a jump scare or something dumb, then they let the breath out. Then they might do another breath, but they let it back out. And when your character is a guy who's in the woods, he has a night that's kind of scary because he hears weird shit. But then we cut to the next morning and he's telling us about how he's going to go boil some onions to make a soup. The balloon is airless again, right? It's inside out. You have to start all over. And I think the problem is like a lot of horror movies go from being pretty tense to zero tension, and they do it over and over. They do it too many times. And at some point we have to accept that something spooky is happening. And from there, we don't need to let the air out anymore. You can fill the balloon more slowly from there, but I think it needs to never decrease from a certain point. And I also think if people can maintain a little more tension, you don't have to put in a full breath every time, right? The tension continues to raise even if you're not escalating the scares every time. So anyway, I think Survive the Hollow Shoals has the guy, you know, he'll be out, he hears a weird noise, and he runs into a girl with hair combed over her face like The Ring or The Grudge, and then the next day it's kind of normal again. And I think that's the main problem with this movie. Like, it would have worked a little better if the filmmaker, I think, plotted it out on paper and created a rising tension. Just literally graph it out. How tense are things right now? How tense should things be? And create a rising tension that didn't let up at a certain point as opposed to rising and falling as much as it did. I also have to say the sound design like really lets this movie down. You hear the sounds he hears out in the woods are like very stock screams. They're screams that movie viewers have heard before. And like, I think you could use nature sounds that are pretty fucking frightening. You know what I mean? Like elk bugling is weird. Loons are spooky. Rabbits can scream. Kiwis have a weird scream. And I know these sounds wouldn't all necessarily appear in the specific woods this guy was in. But I think by like being animal sounds or maybe combining them with human sounds, they have a more fitting feel to them. You know what I mean? When it's just straight up human sounds, I don't know, it falls flat for me. Like when it's just immediately like, well, that's a person laughing. Here's what we'll do. I'm going to make a spooky sound and drop it into the movie. So first, let's do the real movie with the real sound it had. now here's the updated version. So I want to grade this on a scary animal noise scale. So if we're talking about the scariest sound being something like, I don't know, a lion's roar, or the T-Rex from Jurassic Park or whatever, I would put this movie at about a...
It's helpful, Snowman, Podoween 2025.